So welcome everybody. My name is Bob Ballard. I'm with Planet Technologies. Today's session is Quick Wins with Azure. Um, so we're going to kind of start off with a little bit of an overview of the platform in general, just a couple pieces from a business perspective, and then talk about some areas where we can drill down and be more effective quickly and get some quick wins. As required by law, I think from our marketing, I think the ladies are on with me right now. I need to do a couple of quick points about who Planet is in case you don't know. 6-time federal partner of the year, 5-time state local partner of the year, Windows partner of the year current, state government cloud partner of the year, was Office 365 partner of the year for state and local before that. Very active all the workloads, all the verticals in public sector as well as the commercial space. Not going to spend a bunch of time reading these to you, but over 150 senior consultants, a number of Microsoft certified SharePoint, Microsoft certified masters for SharePoint. I think there's only about 30 or 40 of those in the world, and 3 or 4 of those are here at Planet. As well as other, significant accreditations, et cetera, from a technology standpoint. Planet Technologies on the Office 365 side has moved 3 million seats to the Microsoft Cloud, as well as some of the largest really Azure implementations as well across public sector. So if I can experience there, and that'll sort of be the end of the commercial. So you look forward, right? How do we take, these technology innovations with mobile, the emphasis on cloud and mobile, social, big data, all of those, and, guide them towards mapping to your business innovation, right? How do we get better productivity out of it, customer growth, or better in government space, better insight or interactions with with our constituent, better insights, and embrace these new technology models. I have sessions that I deliver called cloud strategy sessions, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. That help us map these priorities. In times, I think one of the biggest mistakes we make around here is not layering. We think about the next steps and quick wins in these cloud spaces as what technology decisions we make. We want to make sure that we actually marry these with the business decisions that we make as well. So when we think about cloud and IT strategy, right, taking what you have going on in your data center, the physical and virtual machines, where do I go from there, right? Virtualization in the cloud, right? There's got to be more to it than what we're looking at. It's cheaper, isn't it? Right? My data center is constrained. I've already got people in my business groups that are already using it. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons looking at the cloud, looking at virtualization, infrastructure, etc. So how do I then, and then I think one of the other major items that we have to think about when we're planning out the first steps here in Azure is what I often recommend is the first step is not how do I get my infrastructure into Azure. The first step is let's evaluate all of my infrastructure. Are there elements that are software where I can migrate them to software as a service? Office 365 is a great Microsoft example, but many of the custom line of business systems that you have also have, software as a service models that are out there. What low-hanging fruit can I just eliminate? So I just did a long, for one of our best customers at Planet last week, briefing talking about this, and the we did was, hey, take your couple, we started with a couple hundred servers, we're, highlighting out. And, when we got done mapping out where these things go, we cut the number in half because half the servers had a destination that was ultimately software as a service. At first place, low-hanging fruit look there, right? So, let's talk about, the industry validation around, Azure as opposed to, say, Amazon Web Services, et cetera, right? One of the key, and I'm not going to make this about a commercial for Azure, but I do want to talk about one of the things that I tell my customers right away, and that's the strength of the Azure platform is its comprehensiveness, right? It's not just an infrastructure as a service opportunity. It's not just, base and application development in the cloud. It's platform as a service. It's, hosted websites. It's software as a service components when you think about elements of it like identity management out of the box and um, the enterprise mobility suite, that's a piece of Azure, right? So everything from infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service broken down into storage and other elements, right? So it's a completely comprehensive platform that allows you to take pieces and parts from your data center and ultimately marry them to the right pieces and parts that are in Azure. It's not a case of when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? You've got options. Look across there is, Microsoft is an industry leader across those workloads, right? Enterprise application platform as a service, public cloud infrastructure as a service, server virtualization, cloud storage, right? When you look at these, the other vendors in those windows often change, right? But Microsoft stays top, the top right quadrant for the Gartner Magic Quadrant across all of these workloads, and there's more, right? This is just, put more than 5 of them on a slide and can't read them anymore, but they're, all across the board. So as we start looking at we whittle down or focus on the workloads, one of the things I like to start to talk about is um, taking a look at your portfolio, right? And I think there's going to be some controversy in how I position this first, but I want you to listen through to think about what I mean by it. Basically, half the stuff you've got going on in your organization is somehow application or infrastructure operations that I would say is what impacts production is not your production application, right? And so, and what I'm talking about that is, backup, disaster recovery, test, storage, infrastructure elements, et cetera, that are, yes, they're a piece of the story of keeping your application operations, going, but it's not, hey, this is the mission critical line of business app that, we all are using constantly, and, I'm terrified about moving it up. So when we look across most organizations, right, a lot of what's going on in your organization, especially with the advent of virtualization, right? So, you know, only what I would say is the highest end, um, I would say the highest end, organizations had fully vetted physical dev and test environments especially in the government sector back in the day when everything was physical. Now that things are also with the advent of virtualization, right? Fully vetted dev and test environments, multiple copies of things, our testing scenarios, et cetera, have crept across a broader range of these organizations. So you add all that stuff up along with infrastructure you have around backup and all of that, then it's oftentimes 50% of the infrastructure you have that's used less than 5 to 10% of the time. If you throw in there some low-hanging fruit applications that are rarely used as well, it's easy to get that number to 50 to 70%. These are very low risk projects that could have big ROI. So the next sort of tier, right? Apps you bought, right? What can you stop doing and use the software as a service model, right? Like I sort of referenced this before. Take a look at Office 365, Exchange and SharePoint, CRM Online, all of the, the typical Microsoft stuff. But, let's be honest, right? We also use technologies that are not Microsoft focused. In the example I did with my executive briefing and cloud strategy session with the customer I was referring to, they were a healthcare vendor. in the and so they had applications. They already had many of the applications they were using had opportunities to update themselves with software as a service models, right? So start looking at what can go down that path, and then anything new that you're going to make, right? So hey, the next year is we've got a new application. It's custom or it's slightly custom, or we're acquiring a new one. Line in the sand. Anything new, we're gonna is the place to go. So if we think about this, application operations and infrastructure, right? Your dev, test, storage, all those infrastructure elements, disaster recovery, etc. Looking at a plan for the applications that you bought. Are they going to run in the infrastructure as a service, or is there a software as a service model? And then anything new you're going to build. And then the last one, existing production apps that you built, right? Um, Move small and the high burst workloads first, right? So what I mean by that is, hey, I've got, we all have a bunch of little niche applications, et cetera, that don't have, that are drastically important to, say, the person that use them, but their impact across the enterprise's footprint, right? And then the other ones to target are applications that could gain from, in the public sector world, think about things like tax-based applications, right? I use this as a great example because the reality is the impact in, you know, April of the tax department, city, county tax organizations, more load going on and usage going on in those months than they are in the other 10 months of the year. Um, Things that have yearly deadlines or et cetera. A number have high bursting, high utilization, ends of quarters for certain applications, for grants, et cetera. All of these things, those first. So as we think about the applications, right? Um, you know, targeting the infrastructure. But before we go into that, I just want to take just seconds to talk about, okay, if we're going to start targeting some of this application infrastructure, how are we going to connect your data center to Azure is important. Down and establish, okay, hey, scenario one, I'm just going to do VPN over the internet. The benefits of that, fast market, low, zero cost in an additional sense. Downside of that is, I'm going over the internet, regardless of VPN or not, a security problem. The issue becomes, can I predictability? Can I, no real controls around quality of service, et cetera. And we're going to push forward deeply in there, looking at something like Express Route. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. We've done other sessions on leveraging Express Route, et cetera. Work with us or Microsoft to talk about what your options are there, but get that established. So we start thinking about that, the first place that I like to talk to customers about is enterprise workloads depend on storage. Storage is a great low-hanging fruit element. Hey, I put all this commit in. We think about what Azure commit is for enterprise agreement customers is a lot like having a lawyer on retainer, a data center on retainer. What's the one thing that is constantly growing in your data center that you would love to have the ability to have some redundancy at low cost, flexibility, et cetera, the ability to grow and not have to predict at the same level that you do with buying new storage cabinets, et cetera, is storage, right? So almost anything you're building, any new application, any existing application, et cetera, is going to grow in storage. So what's the dilemma? Hey, we have huge up and down changes, not so much down, but growth, what those charges are, and sort of the stair step model predictability problem is, hey, I'm at the edge of my current storage cabinet infrastructure. That means I actually need to go acquire a new cabinet, a significant new investment, et cetera. How do I handle backup, disaster recovery? And now that all those solutions are going to disk now, which is great, a lot more flexible, a lot better speed than the old tape days. But then what am I doing with those? Am I copying somewhere else? Do I have a secondary data center? Do I have a partner or co-located center where those go? And all these different storage systems, et cetera, the complexity of managing all of them, and my agility to do so in a world where I need to go to procurement to acquire everything and go through a process and maybe an RFP, maybe not, et cetera. How quickly, if I determine that I need more storage and I need to quickly act on that, how quickly can I get there? Right? Particularly in government can be a huge issue, right? So, focus on hybrid cloud storage, backup, disaster recovery first, right? And those are the key workloads we're going to talk about initially here. Obviously, manage cloud and file share, exact customer, that's a complex conversation, right? So, do we leverage OneDrive? Do we leverage Office 365 groups and SharePoint? Or do we sort of duplicate the infrastructure that we have in place today in the cloud? Your mileage may vary. I think, the majority of customers looking at that as a service option first with Office 365, but there are options there, right? So here is, let's get your backup and recovery story down, right? Hey, let's protect important data with automatic backup using Azure storage, right? Backing up directly there. Let's ensure your business continuity with directly backing up VMs and their data, making them available with things like Azure Site Recovery, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Making them available so that they can be spun up on a moment's notice, right? Use consistent tools for your backup. So talking about plugging into the System Center Configuration Manager, System Center suite in general around the ability to do having a consistent story right into Azure. Hey, the enterprise data protection manager that I'm using today can leverage Azure as a destination, mount those, store them, plug right into a whole story of snapping active VMs and copying them up there, the ability to spin them up in the case of having a low cost, highly available solution where I'm just mainly paying for storage costs as opposed to, more highly performant but higher cost, duplicate infrastructure up there, right? So talking about Azure backup and site recovery as part of the operations management suite, right? Looking at things like hybrid cloud storage with StorSimple. So, one of the interesting scenarios that I think customers come up with is, hey, I wanna leverage some of this storage. I'm a little concerned. I'm only going to dip my toe in the water at first with my infrastructure. Maybe I'm not going to go the express route. I'm just going to do VPN over the internet. I'm afraid of the performance when I start having 1,000 people going over that to do regular access. I need to, with my backup scenario. So one of the examples that this really rears its head with a product like StorSimple, which I'm going to talk to exactly what it is in a second, is, hey, if I'm going to do a restore, the likelihood of me doing it right away is much higher than as time goes by. So what if we took an appliance that had storage built in, couple of tiers on it. Hey, really fast SSDs with minimal storage. Another tier of high performant traditional drives, right? Final tier of cloud storage. So the ability to mirror everything that's on the appliance up in the cloud for redundancy purposes as well, right? So an enterprise SAN environment that ultimately has tier 1, Ds, tier 2, traditional drives, tier 3, the cloud, in a seamlessly integrated, automated process. Built-in deduplication and compression to sort of, take the highest advantage of that. Automatic policies that sort of roll things up from the fastest to the next fastest to the next fastest. Ability to do DR with the device that automatically also replicates the entire infrastructure up to the cloud. So when I'm putting files on there, or I'm doing my initial snaps for backup purposes, for instance, Hey, the likelihood of me needing to do some sort of recovery of the most recent storage is just recently. Hey, I had a failure. I need to restore from Snap. We did an update to a drive to a VM. The whole thing blew up. I just want to recover it from Snap, etc. That's on the local, maybe even the SSD drive still. Hey, we need to look at some compliance stuff. I want down, we're going to need to do some restores of an old drive to take a look from a discovery perspective, et cetera. I can bring that down from the cloud. That's not an emergency situation, right? So how do we leverage that for files, intelligent use of file allocation, backups, et cetera? Very interesting, powerful, flexible scenario there. So leveraging premium storage with Azure, as I put applications up there, so some people are like, well, so I have a really high performance workload. I'm nervous about putting that up in Azure. Well, what if I leverage the premium storage feature, which is to have SSD based storage connected to your virtual machine within Azure, getting very highly performant, many ways more performant than people are able to get premise when it comes to processing IOs, et cetera. 64 terabytes of capacity, 2,000 megs a second. Very high 80,000 IOPS per VM, right? Very high performance environment. So for highest end workloads. Now, again, if we go back to my model that we talked about, am I saying take your most complex, integrated, architected, and all over environment that's already built today and running in your probably not the first environment that I take of. We go back to the title, right? This is quick wins. But a new application that needs to roll up, and my concern is it needs to be highly performant. Fact of building it in Azure, not blocked in any capacity by the need to be highly performant. Anyways, significantly more highly performant and lower entry cost to get them than you would experience. In fact, if I had to build out this infrastructure on premise. So we talked a little bit about this, right? So there's some interesting, there's some interesting scenarios around file shares and leveraging, many organizations, and this is where I recommend kind of talking it through with someone from my team or someone at Microsoft, et cetera. Destinations for file share should be, particularly if I'm on Office 360. Now, I think it's obvious in the home drive scenario today, so user home drives, et cetera, that's clearly destined for OneDrive. I think it makes sense. You want to leverage those powerful capabilities that OneDrive have to bear, et cetera. The next step, though, is what about departmental shares? What about large scale, depending on what your organization has, large, storage of CAD drawings and all kinds of things that large organizations might have that maybe isn't exactly the perfect fit in the OneDrive scenario. Or, hey, I want to draw a line in the sand. New stuff is going to go in SharePoint, but the old stuff I want to leave around. I want to mount them. I want to get redundancy in my availability immediately versus trying to figure out where the destination for these files go. Leveraging the cloud file share using Azure is a great place to get this geo-redundant, available from external environment if you want. A number of these options to make these things available to you. A great, again, first sort of tier option. So a little bit about the business continuity and disaster recovery scenario, right? I have entire 2-hour talks on this process. But hey, leveraging Microsoft Azure Backup, I can get backups of my environment and centrally manage it with Data Protection Manager. I can leverage Hyper-V for clustering failover and StorSimple to sort of speed that process, dedupe it, etc. Using SQL high availability always on replication to replicate databases up there as well in complex applications. I can have orchestrated virtual machine replication using Azure Site Recovery for both physical and virtual machines. right? So I can actually be taking regular replication of my applications. I can be doing standard backups. I can be doing replication backups. Using if those applications are using an active SQL backend, I can be using you know, the ability to do SQL always on replication to have that available. So I'm replicating the VMs, taking snaps and copying them up there. If I have a failover, a significant data failure, I can fail over instantly. And by the way, I can also use more traditional side. I can have infrastructure as a service, clustering all over across there. But those be for the shortest recovery time objectives that you need, right? So RTOs of near instantaneous. Well, what if I want to make sure that I have all of these servers available, at a very short time, but I don't want to pay what it costs to have, 50 copies of my servers actively running in a secondary data center up in Azure. So leveraging something like Azure Site Recovery allows me to sort of lower the cost of what this is, and still have a very highly available on-demand data center to deliver significant high availability gains, right? So sort of the operational framework, low-hanging fruit. So there's one more I'm going to get to that I actually didn't have a slide on that I would like to hint at. So as I mentioned before, Planet has moved over 3 million seats to the Microsoft Cloud across public sector, commercial sector, all the federal, state, local, education, etc. One of the first workloads that it started out, it was a small percentage, and now it's nearly 80% of our customers is targeting infrastructure as a service, moving their directory infrastructure, directory federated services up into Azure, right? And I view this as an operational piece. Hey, we've moved cloud for Office 365 and other software as a service vendors. So one of the things I said that we need to target is, hey, look at your other third-party vendors and do they have software as a service? Many of them integrate with Active Directory federated services, and you start pushing more and more services there. I want to make sure that's not my single point of failure. I moved to the cloud, I should be highly available, yet if I can't log in, I'm not available at all. So one final element, a key beginning workload is to get at least your entire either your entire ADFS infrastructure up there, or at least piece of your cluster up into Azure, so that if I have that catastrophic data center failure, none of these cloud plans that I've made are impacted in any way. So we start talking about, hey, let's look at what our our packaged applications are and how they integrate in the cloud world. Oops. So I'm going to go back. Sorry, I've got a little itchy on the trigger finger here. So start looking at applications, whether they be other people's software as a service, leveraging directory, Azure Active Directory Premium, for instance, to connect with other applications. So there's a huge push as we look forward, integrating other people's self-service and single sign-on capabilities, leveraging Azure. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time talking now. Azure Active Directory Premium to integrate those. One place that was that I think that the area has really matured early as well, and now everyone else has caught up with, was in the education space, where you saw hundreds and hundreds of applications leveraging this infrastructure to easily connect and point right in. So the ability to go in and have a managed, whether it be heaven forbid third-party applications that aren't Microsoft, right, that have that integrate seamlessly into your enterprise infrastructure, leveraging Active Directory Premium as a part of that. And then looking at and then taking, hey, as I move forward, these first tier of applications, hey, they won't host it. They don't have a software as a service application themselves. Let's take new applications as we shift gears, new business applications, and put them on to two categories. Hey, it's custom, or it's off the shelf, ready to go, guided installations. Right, we're probably going to do infrastructure as a service, put them up there, integrate with your current directory infrastructure. We're building new applications, right? We want to start looking at how can I take advantage of, because one of the things didn't have enough time to really get into in this talk was one of the things we start looking at as we evaluate infrastructure as a service versus platform as a service is we want to delegate the management of the server infrastructure even one step further, right? So we have a virtualized environment. That was the be all end all of management. I don't have hardware to worry about. I don't have any of that stuff to worry about, or certainly limit my footprint of that. Then we move up to cloud-based infrastructure as a service. I have zero hardware, not even the host to deal with. But I still have to patch it. I still have to manage that element of it. If I take it one layer of abstraction further, and I platform as a service, then suddenly, right, I don't have to manage any of those. I just need to focus on the pieces and parts of my custom line of business application that I'm developing. So then, I can auto scale based on pieces of the application. I can really, really at the highest levels just use the data center resources that I need for my application at the moment, right? So when we start looking at costs from a cost perspective, right? So I have a much lower. I'm not managing OSs. I'm not patching. I'm not worrying about any of that stuff. That stuff sort of happens magically in the background. I don't even see. Then the second piece of it is I'm really only paying for the resources that I'm using. If I'm spinning up a server and I'm running a Windows server and I have an application that's a high, moderate performance application, et cetera, just to keep my Windows Server running at a very low level, there's a cost associated with that, even in an infrastructure as a service environment. So if my application as a service is sitting there with no activity, I'm basically spending almost zero money to run that. So my ability to take those new business applications, target building them as application, as platform as a service, and moving forward, leveraging that and taking yet one step further away from the management capabilities required. So custom applications that are on your infrastructure. So again, we're talking about how do I handle phase 1, phase 1.5, phase 2 in my Azure place. Long term, so if we're looking at the first steps as I step forward, right? The complex custom applications, I've got SAP with custom front ends that I've built for my organization, or Oracle Financials. In general, first tier, we're leaving those alone for it. Exceptions, right, are high burst and high performance. So, in the government space, we don't see much high performance computing scenarios. We see it more in education, maybe some in federal. But if you do have very complex data analytics platform stuff, we might want to think about that. The high burst scenario is a scenario in which we often look at and I mentioned at the very beginning, we often do see in government, which is, process driven applications have a much higher utilization, based on the time of the year or the certain circumstances. Or, for example, we built an application for a government customer that was an emergency vehicle registration application for, so it was in an area where, where they had a lot of snowstorms. So log on to the website and you say, I have a 4-wheel drive vehicle. I'm willing to shuttle nurses around if there's a blizzard. Doctors, emergency personnel, etc. I'm willing to volunteer to do that. Well, 90% of the time, 99% of the time, that application does absolutely nothing. When a disaster occurs, the blizzard hits, suddenly it goes from zero utilization to tens of thousands of people potentially registering in a major city, right? So scenarios like that, tax applications, any other deadline-driven license applications, etc., those kinds of things, move them quickly because I can, it's an example of if I'm running it on premise, I need a really big server and a really big allocation of a VM to run this thing most of the time, when it's in its high utilization period, but then I need next to nothing all the rest of the time. So those are the exceptions of the complex custom phase one scenarios we're talking about. Eventually, by the way, and the customer I was referring to that we sort of mapped out their strategy, in their 2-year strategy, 2.5-year strategy, we mapped out basically a plan to eliminate their entire data center, their mid-sized customer. But in the first waves of these, none of these, complex custom applications, it's not tier one. Let's wait on those. The next exception, low usage applications, right? So, hey, the ones that you talk about, there's 15 people that use it. It's really important for them, but they're not high utilization. There's smaller impact across the enterprise, et cetera. Those off. Let's get those really, because here's where you're going to see cost savings, right? Let's get them stop taking up space in a VM that I have to carve out, et cetera. Anything where I'm looking to do end of life of hardware, and I'll add a third category that I don't see on this is, so we all know that people still have Windows Server 2003 applications in their enterprise, right? Your enterprise remediation plan for Windows Server 2003, if you're looking down the path of what are quick wins for Azure, is let's take your Windows Server 2003 servers, and then we got to re-platform them anyway. Let's just re-platform them in Azure from the very beginning. And in many cases, right, there's programs from Microsoft to help you do that. So end of life hardware, OS stuff, they should go directly Azure. Those are the exceptions of sort of your custom enterprise application scenarios that normally would move to phase 2. So with that, in keeping to trying to keep my talk to 40 minutes on the button, I'm actually 1 minute early. Were there any questions out there around opportunities, et cetera? Any questions? So I'm putting down here my address. So one of the things that I do, I have a little bit about cloud strategy at the beginning. I'm going to offer anybody on this call the availability, if they want one, to have a cloud strategy session with me or someone on my team, most likely be me, to talk you through thinking through some of these scenarios in a little more in depth. We can through some opportunities. The idea is to come out with the first couple of key workloads. Everyone on this call, I'm offering that at no charge. If you'd like to, depending on the circumstances, your timing, all of that, it may be virtual, it may be in person, depending on how it all works out. But I'm happy to walk through that with you. Come out with some key action items tailored to you as we walk away. If you email me at rballard@goplanet.com, to get that scheduled. Right now, we're probably into February. You have something urgently pending, and maybe we can try to squeeze you in. But I'm happy to go ahead and get that kick-started for you. I'm going to unmute everyone real quick to see if there are any questions out there. So let me participate action. Everyone is allowed to unmute themselves now if you'd like to have a question. Are there any questions out there? Or feel free to type them over the IM window.
Bob, is this going to be recorded somewhere we can watch again if we need to, or pass it along?
I recorded the entire presentation. We're going to publish it to the Planet Technologies YouTube channel.
Okay.
So it'll be available, and I think as a follow-up, we'll send everybody. We might be able to send everybody a link to the meeting as a follow-up too.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Alrighty, well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll go ahead and wrap up. Once, going twice. That's a wrap.